In this video, I'm going to continue where I left off, and I'm going to modify my program to work more like it says in the quiz game, where we can click on the numbers and check to see if we're right or wrong at that point. So I have to kind of think of how my program is going to run from like a bird's eye view. So let's see if what we can keep and what we have to change. Okay, so we want to have the list of questions as a global variable so that every single sprite can access that list of questions. That's fine for now. But then what I did with Alonzo is I created a script variable. So only Alonzo has access to that script variable or that value of random question, which we set as a random number between 1 and 2, which is the number of questions that we had. So I don't think I should use this because none of the other sprites will have access to this number. So I can't have them check like the list of questions to see if the answer is right if only Alonzo can check that. So I'm going to turn random question from a script variable to a global variable. So now I got to make random question to be a global variable. And I'm going to, actually we already have it set right here. We're going to set it to the random number. So this doesn't change. And that's fine. Now every single sprite can access the value of random question. And you guys can see it here on the stage. You can see that right now it says random question is 0, list of questions is 0. So we just have to be very careful of like potential bugs that may arise by having a global variable because we tend to want to keep things separate. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to ask the user to find the RAM or the CPU. But I don't want to use an ask block because if I use ask and wait, then a little dialog box will pop up so that the user has to type something in. So I have to think of another way I can ask the user a question without having them have to type something in to continue. So I think I'm going to use a say block. And I'm going to use a say block so that, and I'm not going to use the say for 2 seconds or whatever number of seconds. I just want to say what the question is so it doesn't disappear in case the user forgets. So I'm going to move my code for the random question up into the say block. And great. The next thing I want to do is I want to broadcast that I've asked the question and that all the sprites should maybe receive that broadcast and check to see if the answer is correct. Okay, so how do we do this? Let me think. So what we have to do, I think, is have each sprite check the list of questions, check the question that was asked, check the answer that was asked, and see if it matches with their number, I guess. So let's do that for number 2 first, because we're only going to be doing 2 and 3 because I only did the CPU and RAM. Let's start with the CPU. So actually, let me go back for a second, and I have to broadcast. So let me broadcast to all of the sprites that an answer was, they already have a couple of broadcasts here. Try again and next question. I guess maybe that has to do with like the functionality that we might want to include later on in like C, D, E, or F. Because I could definitely see having another hat block inside of Alonzo to do the next question if the user gets it wrong or to try again if we're keeping score like that. But for now, I'm just going to broadcast that an answer was, or a question was delivered. Or maybe question asked. Let's use that language. Question asked. And now what I want to do is when my sprites receive question asked, so where is that? When I receive question asked, and I have to keep in mind that Sprite 2 is going to do this, Sprite 3 is also going to have this. All of them eventually will have this. But for now, I just want to get it to work with Sprite 2. When I receive question asked, what I wanted to do is I wanted to check to see if, so let's see, if actually let me think. Oh, when they receive question asked, they want to know what the answer should be. Actually, when I receive question asked, let me try to think of that because I want to have the user click on the actual sprite. So when a user clicks on sprite 2, that's when I check to see if their answer was right. Let me think. when I receive question asked. You know what? We might have to change this later on. I'm going to actually start off with when I'm clicked. So when the sprite is clicked, we want to check to see if the answer equals, actually, what did I call it in Alonzo? If the list of questions, or the random question from the list of questions, so here we go, let me bring this over. Let me bring this part over, this answer equals list 2 of whatever, because that's going to be very similar, I think, or maybe even identical, but actually not identical because we don't have an answer. But we want to check to see if, well, let's see, CPU is 2. So we'll check to see if 2 equals the answer. Let me move this down and let me try to explain what I'm thinking here because I'm just like doing this on the fly without really planning. So what I could do is I can give each one of these sprites a number. So CPU is obviously number 2. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to check the second item of the random question that was set in Alonzo, which is a global variable, from the list of questions, which was also set inside of Alonzo when the game was run. And I want to check to see if that value equals 2. And if that is the case, maybe then we broadcast the correct answer was given. So we can broadcast correct answer. So we could have Alonzo be the one that says if something was right or wrong. So I could have the sprite either broadcast correct or broadcast incorrect. So let's see, incorrect. And that might work. Let me try to think if that's going to be good. Yes, because no other sprite is going to detect whether the other sprites broadcast correct or incorrect. All they're going to do is broadcast whether it's correct or incorrect when they're clicked. And when they're clicked, they're only checking to see if the answer is correct at that point. So actually, maybe we don't need the when I receive question asked. Maybe we don't need that broadcast. So I'm going to remove it for now. Let me think. Is there a way to remove a broadcast easily? That's fine. For now, I'll leave it, but I guess we'll find a way to delete it later. Okay, so maybe this will work. So what will happen is when I click on the sprite, let me just make sure that everything else is correct. Let me remove the broadcast. Actually, I think when I remove the broadcast, it automatically deletes it. Yep. So I don't have to delete it like from anywhere. So what's going to happen is I'm going to set the list of questions. I'm going to set the random question. I'm going to say the question. And then when I click on one of the sprites, it's going to tell me if I'm right or wrong. So let me try this out. So which item is the RAM? Ooh, I just noticed that I misspelled which right over here. Let me rerun it. Which item is the CPU? So I should be clicking on 2, the sprite that has number 2 there. Let me kind of hide these variables for now so I can see what I'm clicking. So when I click on 2, which is the only one that has the only sprite that has code right now, it should broadcast correct or incorrect. Unfortunately, I haven't added something to Alonzo to handle that, so maybe I should do that first before I try clicking it. So when I receive, let's say correct, do something, and when I receive incorrect, do something else. So when I receive correct, we're going to say you're right for 2 seconds. When I receive you're incorrect, we're going to say you're wrong for 2 seconds. So what's going to happen is if the question that's set is, let's say the first question, and I click on the wrong answer, it's going to detect that it's going to know, each sprite is going to know what the question was, and they're going to check to see if the answer for that question is their number that I'm going to set inside of the if statement, inside of each of these. So I think this should work. If I click on the CPU right now, if I click on number 2, it should say, Alonzo should say you're right for 2 seconds. And he says you're right for 2 seconds, and then the game is over, or it stops right now. Now, I don't need this if statement inside of Alonzo anymore. I don't need this one either because I've already created it inside of the CPU. So now what I want to do is I want to duplicate this code inside of the RAM. sprite because it's going to be almost identical to that. So I'm just going to drag it over and hover it over RAM, and when I let go, it creates a copy inside of RAM. So all I have to change is 2 to 3 inside of RAM, because RAM is the answer for RAM is 3. So I'm going to check to see if the value for the answer matches the what I said here in the if statement. So I think my game should be able to run right now. What I want to do actually is I want it to start when I click on the green flag. So just to make it a little bit easier, consistent, when I click on the green flag, he asks which item is the RAM. So I'm going to click on the wrong answer right now. So if I click on 2, Alonzo says you're wrong, which is exactly what I want. Let me rerun the game. Which item is CPU? Let me click on 2 now, which is the CPU. And he says you're right. Let me rerun it again. Which item is the CPU? Let me put the right answer. You're right. Which item is the CPU? Let me run it again until he says which item is the RAM. There we go. And let me click on number 3 to see if the third sprite works. And he says you're right. So awesome. We have the functionality working now. And all we have to do is add this block of code or this script to all of the other sprites and just change the number inside the if statement. Because all of them, just to recap, have access to the list of questions and they have access to the random question that was picked. Because that is set when I click on the green flag. Now, the problem is if I want to ask another question, and I guess here's where next question comes in, we probably just have to reset the random question. We don't have to reset the whole list of questions. And if we want to keep score, we have to basically add some functionality, maybe add another variable for score. And when the person's correct, we add 1 to your right, or we change the correct number of points or points by 1. And when they're wrong, we change points by -1. So that could be a way that I could keep score in this game. Now, I'm actually looking at letter E where it says, decide whether to keep track of what's been asked so the components don't repeat, and if so, how to do it. What we could do is we could create another variable called last question, and when we set random question, we check to see that it's not the last question, that the random number we pick isn't the same as the previous random number. We could do something like that. Otherwise, keep picking random questions until we get a different one. That could be a way to do that. And I guess it'll be up to you guys to decide when to end the game. So I think at this point, I've shown you enough where you can take what I've shown you and really extrapolate and make the game your own. But I just wanted to show you guys how to get the functionality working and how I thought through the problems. And this is pretty much unedited, so you guys can see like where I get stuck and like what I was thinking. And if you guys have any suggestions, make sure to post it in the comments below so other people can see. Also, I want to mention one more thing. This year, I'm going to be teaching people how to learn JavaScript. So if you want to try a text-based programming language, make sure to check out that series. But if you found this video helpful, make sure to click that like button. And if you want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe.